So we'll start the webinar now. Good evening, doctors. I'm Gaurav, Marketing Head from Sonoscape India. On behalf of Sonoscape, I'd like to take an opportunity to thank all of you for your continuous support during the whole series of educational webinars done by Sonoscape during this lockdown period in last 2 months. Also, I'd like to welcome all of you for today's webinar. The topic of today's webinar is ultrasound evaluation in Mullerian anomalies. And to conduct this webinar, today we have a renowned faculty guest speaker, Dr. Manju Virmani ma'am with us. Ma'am has a vast experience in radiology with board certification in radiology from Washington, DC, and a fellowship in ultrasound and breast imaging from USA. Ma'am has done major work in the field of women's health with special emphasis on volume imaging in gynae and breast. Ma'am has been a faculty in many of the national and international conferences also. On behalf of Sonoscape, I'd like to thank you, ma'am, for your continuous support, and also like to thank you again to take out time from your busy schedule for today's webinar. As still many people are joining the webinar, so I'd like to take few minutes of you to share a product video of our premium segment color Doppler system S60, which is based on artificial intelligence platform. So I'll run the video now. As you have observed in the video, that artificial intelligence identifies the clinical images which are coming on screen with the deep learning and provides you the detailed information with just a click of a button with accuracy more than 95%. At the same time, it saves a lot of your time. Today, there are many auto measurements available in different kinds of systems, but The artificial intelligence platform, what we're using in our system, is totally based on a new concept and very much user friendly to the users. Now, without taking much time, I'd like to hand over the session to Dr. Manju Mivani, ma'am. Thank you so much. Over to you, ma'am. I will stop share my screen. Yeah, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, we can see your screen.
Okay.
Thank you.
So before starting, I would like to thank the Sonoscape team, Gaurav and Mahinder, for organizing these real academic sessions, and also thank them for having me here to speak on the uterine Mullerian anomalies. But before starting, I would also like to hope that all of you are doing well in the present scenario, and hopefully this COVID will die down and we'll be able to get back to our normal lives. So uterine, we're going to talk on the uterine Mullerian anomalies and add some changing concepts to it. So what is it? They are congenital malformation of the female genital tract, are defined as deviations from normal anatomy resulting from embryological maldevelopment of the Mullerian or paramesonephric ducts. There's a wide prevalence difference in the prevalence reporting. So in general population, it's between 4 and 7%. And in women with history of recurrent miscarriage, it almost doubles. It's about 15%. And that's most of the studies agree to this sort of prevalence uh, this rate. Now we need to know some embryology, and which is that there are these at 6 weeks of gestation, there are these paired Mullerian ducts or paramesonephric ducts which are seen lateral to the ovaries. These migrate medially and fuse to form the uterovaginal septum. By 11 to 12 weeks, between 10 and 11 actually, they fuse. There's resorption of the medial septum, which results in the formation of the uterus, the cervix, and the proximal two-thirds of vagina. The distal third of vagina, the fallopian tubes, and ovaries are not a part of the Mullerian duct anomalies. Now, to understand this, it's very simple. If we look at the process which gets involved in the ductal, at the time of ductal development. And so if there's a problem at that time, it may result in aplasia or hypoplasia of the uterus, cervix, or vagina. If there's a problem at the fusion level, then one gets what we call a bicorporal uterus, but from the earlier classification, it may be didelphus and a bicornuate. If the septum fails to resolve and it still persists, that results in a septate uterus. Now, it's important to know that because clinically they have a lot of adverse reproductive outcome, especially first trimester spontaneous abortion, which is very high with septate uterus. It almost goes up to about 45% in the first trimester. Even hemiuterus has a higher probability, which is about 50%. But when we diagnose a bicorporal uterus, they have a lower first trimester abortion rate, but they have a very high mid trimester problems. That's because of the cervical incompetence. So when we diagnose this, we have to follow these women up very frequently, almost at an interval of 2 weeks after 12 weeks, to make sure that the cervix is properly evaluated on real-time evaluation and shouldn't be opening up. The other complications can happen with this is ectopic pregnancy. If the in a hemiuterus, if it is associated with a rudimentary horn which has a functional cavity, the pregnancy can take place in that horn. Once that happens, we all know it's a very serious problem because these uterus can rupture. In the hemiuterus, the other problems can be growth restriction. Not that growth restriction does not take place with the other ones also, but it has a higher probability with hemiuterus. The other problems could be preterm labor, which may be because of premature rupture of membranes. There could be abnormal malpresentations because of the structural deformity. The fetus does not take the normal position. But it's also well known that more than 50% of the women may be completely asymptomatic from the obstetrical point of view. Now, they may present with infertility, but generally speaking, MDAs are not the reason for their infertility. It could be because these MDAs have a higher association with endometriosis, which is because of retrograde menstrual flow. So here we see a hemiuterus, and there is this endometriotic changes in the adnexa, and that may be the reason for infertility. But there can also be a problem with implantation failure. That's because of malformed uterus and defective endometrium. But like I said, MDA typically don't prevent conception. They have a higher association with renal anomalies, which is the reported prevalence between 30 to 50%. So anytime we diagnose an MDA, it's very important to do a renal scan at the same time. We look for renal angiogenesis. Like in this particular patient, there's a hemiuterus and there is a single pelvic kidney. The other associations could be a horseshoe kidney, pelvic kidney, duplication of collecting system. They could be ectopic ureters. They also have a higher association with skeletal problems, with vertebral body which may be fused, or they may spina bifida. They could be cardiac anomalies, and they could be a part of these syndromes. Now, imaging techniques for diagnosing are there, and I always say a pelvic exam is important to do any gynae exam. But in this particular thing, pelvic exam may not be that helpful, but when we do a speculum exam, it's important because I'll show you two cases. Now, here's one such patient who came with severe pelvic pain. And when they did a speculum exam, they found two vaginal openings. So they did an ultrasound. So we did an ultrasound, and we find that it's a complete septate uterus with two cervices, two vaginal canals, and the fundal contour is normally maintained. Now, this was another patient who was a young woman, recently married, and actually had problems with sexual contact. Again, the speculum showed that there's a septum in the vagina. So before resecting, they all obviously anyone wants to know that there is no septum higher up in the cervix or the uterine cavity, and which by doing this study, we found on a 3D, we found that there is no septum. Now, hysterosalpingogram. Now, here we have, we know that this is it's a beautiful study to look for the patency of the fallopian tubes, but it's very specific when we see a triangular shaped uterus. We know that the uterine shape is normal. When we compare it to these two other histros, obviously they're completely deformed uterine cavities. But we really can't say whether this is uterine didelphys, bicornuate, or is it bicorporal from the newer classification. And in this case, is it a unicornuate or a hemiuterus and we are missing out the other uterine cavity, or is it absent? We cannot answer till we do a 3D ultrasound. And here we have the coronal plane. This does not belong to this patient, but we can see that this is a normal triangular uterine cavity and looks pretty normal. Here, this patient was sent and we did an ultrasound, and actually I had thought it will be a bicorporal uterus, but here we see that the fundal contour is normal convex, and this was a complete septate uterus. Now here this patient had a hemiuterus where we can see the uterine cavity with a single interstitial segment of the fallopian tube, and the other side was not there. The 3D ultrasound plays a very important role because what it does is we get a multiplanar format where we can evaluate the log axis, the transverse and coronal planes simultaneously. And then there is this face-on view of the uterus, which is the rendered image, which actually defines the normal uterine cavity. We know that the normal uterine cavity has a normal convex fundal contour, and the endometrial cavity is a triangular or a pyramidal in shape and is a flat anterior margin. And when we are scanning, we always start off with an endovaginal 2D ultrasound. And here we have two different uterine cavities where we can see there are these two separate endometrial cavities, which are in this particular thing, it is being separated with this white tissue. And here there's a narrow tissue which is separating these two endometrial cavities. And when we do the 3D and the coronal plane, this particular patient has a complete septate uterus, and this patient has a partial septate uterus. There was a study which was done, and there were these group of experts who were picked up, and they said they came to the conclusion that coronal rendered images were ideal to diagnose all the Mullerian anomalies. As we can see here, triangular shape completely lost in these two patients. In the other two coronal images, which are of a partial septate and a hemiuterus. And they all were very happy with using a BCI seaplane, which is actually very good. I actually love to do my studies with this because here we can trace this line through the region of interest, and we have a sagittal and the coronal plane simultaneously. So we have a complete septate uterus, we have a partial septate uterus, and we have a hemiuterus. Now, it's important to classify them because it's important to diagnose them, classify them so that one can come to an effective and efficient planning for therapeutic strategies. Because at present, there are multiple things which are available, and we have to look after these patients, especially to improve their reproductive outcome, to minimize the complications such as endometriosis and infertility, and to prevent unnecessary and occasional inadequate surgeries. Now, the most common classification system which has been used so far is by the American Society of Reproductive Medicine. Earlier, it was called the American Fertility Society. Now, this system combines the degree of developmental failure with clinical manifestation and gives these multiple classes, 6 classes. And we'll be going through it in the next few slides to how to diagnose these. But the major drawback with this classification is that it does not specify the morphological features of the uterus. Then this classification by European Society of Human Reproduction and Embryology, ESHRE classification, has actually is coming over and is taking over from the ASRM. And here the uterine anatomical deviation derived from the same embryological origin, and then they classify according to these multiple classes. Now, the advantages of this ESHRE classification over the American Reproductive Society of Medicine classification is that the anatomy is the primary basis for systemic categorization, with the uterus being the key organ. It's clinically oriented, with prognosis correlating to the type and degree of anatomical deformity. The mode of classification adopted is to sort out the classes and subclasses, and they are labeled according to the increasing severity. All the use of absolute numbers is completely given up in the definition because each uterine size and the wall thickness varies from patient to patient. Normal uterus is added to the classification, and also cervical and vaginal anomalies are classified independently in this classification. Now, this particular group, they also recognize the importance of the congenital abnormalities, so they formed a common working group under the name of CONUTA, which is congenital uterine anomalies. And there is this congenital uterine malformation by expert CUME, which actually gives these measurements, which we'll be seeing in a little while. Now, when we classify there's a normal uterus, we all know that there is these two are normal uterine cavities, normal convex fundal contour, there's a flat anterior margin or a straight interosteal line. The minimal impression seen here, which is normal. There is a triangular shape of the endometrial cavities. There are these two interstitial segments of the fallopian tubes. And sometimes this minimal indentation is seen along the fundal contour, which is less than 50% of the wall thickness and is a normal finding. Now, dysmorphic uterus or class 1 type T type of uterus were actually first diagnosed as congenital malformations when this drug, which is the stilbestrol, was being used. That drug is not being used anymore. But according to ESHRE classification, they classify this T-shaped uterus as lateral wall thickening causing these narrow endometrial cavities. And here there is the uterine corpus is 2/3 and the cervical length is 1/3. And they can be seen in the acquired conditions like tuberculosis, intrauterine adhesions, and adenomyosis. When we measure the CUME, which is what I was talking about, this is how we can actually diagnose a T-shaped uterus, because sometimes it's very difficult to actually say, like in this particular patient, it is difficult to say, is it a normal variant or are we picking up T-shape? So these measurements are very helpful. Now, lateral indentation angle is when we the angle between the lateral wall of the endometrium and the straight edge. So we measure this angle, which should be less than 130 degrees. And we draw a line from the tubal ostia to the internal os, and we measure this thickness of the the distance which this lateral indentation should be more than 7 millimeters. And then there's this T angle, which is formed by the anterior endometrium margin and the lateral margin of the endometrium. And this should be less than 40 degrees. Now, infantile uterus is the class B1B, which is a narrow uterine cavity, but there is no lateral wall thickening in these patients. So here, this is the same patient, long axis and transverse view, which shows a small uterine cavity. Now here, the cervix is much longer as compared to the uterine body. Again, another example of hypoplastic uterus. And sometimes we may see a little bit of cavity, but most of the time these are hypoplastic infantile type of uterine cavities. Now, there are these, we have 3 uterine cavities, and all 3 of them have mild anterior depression along the anterior margin of the endometrial cavity. Now, if we measure this distance from the interosteal line to the tip, to the lowest tip of the endometrium, this thickness measures less than the 50% of the uterine wall thickness, which in this patient we have measured it from the fundus to the interosteal line here. Now, but otherwise, if we look at the morphology, we can see that the uterine fundal contour is normal. It's normal convex. There may be a mild indentation, which may be less than 10 millimeters. It's considered normal. It still has a triangular shape. It still shows us the 2 interstitial segments of the fallopian tubes. And according to the Eschri classification, this is considered normal. Whereas according to the the American Society of Reproductive Medicine classification, this is an arcuate uterus. Now their indentation depth, this is what I talked about, should measure less than 10 millimeters, and we can measure this angle, which is obtuse and is more than 90 degrees, to classify them as arcuate uterus. Now coming to septate uterus, which account for almost 55% of the uterine anomalies, and these are problem with the resorption of the septum. Now here what happens is that we see that there is a tissue which is actually separating the 2 endometrial cavities. And this tissue in this case is extending all the way to the level of cervix. Now, when this septum or the internal indentation displays the endometrial cavity, it ends above the level of internal os. It's a partial septate uterus. And when it goes all the way extending into the cervix, it's a complete type. When we're trying to diagnose, we again look for the anterior fundal contour, which is normal convex. There are 2 separate endometrial cavities which are separated by this septum. And we may look at this mild indentation, which is considered normal. And when we do a 2D exam, that is where we can get the suspicion. Our first sight of suspicion comes when we do a transverse view on an endovaginal study. Like here, we can see 2 separate endometrial cavities, which are being separated by this hypoechoic tissue. And this is the 3D coronal plane of the same patient and shows a complete septate uterus. Now, when we do a multiplanar format, here we can see that the long axis is actually not giving us too much information. So it's a transverse view which gives us 2 endometrial cavities, and again, it's a complete septate uterus. Now, this is another, any time when we have a patient who's come for early pregnancy scan and we see a sac which is eccentrically placed, we must do a 3D to make sure that there is no septate uterus. And like in this particular patient, actually this image is reversed. It should be, this is the right horn and this is the left one. So this is the cavity which showed the intrauterine gestation. And the other endometrial cavity is thick and echogenic. So these patients can bleed because of this decidual reaction in the other horn. So as a this thing protocol, what I do is I never go to the pregnancy first. I always look at the uterine cavity. I do a 3D because it takes me less than half a minute to half a second to do it. And once I've confirmed the uterine shape is normal, I go to the look at the ovaries and then go to the pregnancy. Now, according to when we are using this classification, we measure all these distances. This is internal indentation, which is more than 15 millimeters. We look at the indentation angle, which is less than 90 degrees. We look for the apex, which is the distance above the interosteal line to the fundal contour, which is more than 5 millimeters. If there's a fundal indentation, it should measure less than a centimeter, and we can measure the intercornual distance from this point to this point, which is less than 4 centimeter. But in H3 classification, none of these measurements are needed. What they say is we measure the anterior wall thickness, posterior wall thickness, and we take a mean of these two. And this should be more than 50, the septum length should be more than 50% of the uterine wall thickness to call it a septate uterus. Now, ISWOG recommendation is that this indentation depth or this indentation, internal indentation should measure more than 10 millimeters for it to be called a septate uterus. We are also interested, how does the prognosis, this thing. Now, here is a septate uterus. It has a nice looking cavity, but so there's a gestational sac. So this pregnancy should do fine. This is another septate uterus. Again, I think the cavity here is okay. So it's the length of the cavity, which is maybe an important prognostic finding to say that these people have a higher incidence or the higher risk for first trimester abortions. And these two over here have a smaller cavities, so they have a higher risk. Then also we can look at the vascularity of the septum, because a vascular septum does not give problems with implantation of the embryos. This patient had a history, this is a complete septate uterus, and after hysteroscopic metroplasty, just there's a beautiful reconstruction. We can see, in fact, almost looking a normal, completely normal looking endometrial cavity. And this particular patient had 2 babies after that. And so after doing hysteroscopic metroplasty, it improves, the miscarriage rate has gone down to almost 15 to 20%. And term delivery rates go up by up to 80%. And less than 1 centimeter residual septum is considered as an optimal resection. Now, here's another patient who had the resection, but here, frankly speaking, I don't like it too much because septum is still wide and there is a smaller cavity and looks as if there may be some synechia, which is in this region of the cavity. So this particular uterine cavity still has a poor prognostic outcome. Then we can also, it's not that we don't see other things. Now here, these 2 different patients who presented with abnormal vaginal bleed, and here there's a changes of cystic hyperplasia. We can see the both endometrium on right and left cavities are showing thickened. They are thick. They show multiple cystic areas. So these are cystic hyperplasia. This particular patient had a polyp in the endometrial cavity. Now, this has a problem with conceiving and it has a septate uterus, but also maybe she has had multiple interference and shows dense synechia in this region. This patient, again, we had said earlier that they can be completely asymptomatic and probably has had multiple babies despite partial septate uterus, and one can see an intrauterine device. Now, this young woman who persistently comes with painful menstruation, and I think I've seen her at least 3 times, this pocket of fluid which is collects in her vaginal canal and in the cervix, and she has been aspirated 2 or 3 times to clean this out, so because to relieve her pain. Now, when we are trying to diagnose septate versus arcuate uterus, it's important because, like, if you look at these 6 or 7 images, I would also get scared looking at them. What are we looking at? Now, if I was to say, I would say, okay, this looks like a partial septate and this may be a partial septate. This may be normal, but what are these? Are we dealing with a normal variance according to H3 classification? Or are we dealing with arcuate on a arcuate uterus according to the American Reproductive Society? Yeah. So because of this classification, there's an increased frequency of diagnosing the septate uterus when compared to the ASRM classification. That's where this particular committee, CUME, came up and they defined this criteria for distinguishing between normal arcuate and septate uterus. So the criteria which they use is indentation depth, indentation angle, and indentation to wall thickness ratio. Indentation depth is what? It's a line which we draw between the interosteal line at the edge of the cornua. We draw, and then from the midline we drop a perpendicular to the to the lowest point of the internal indent. Sorry, to the lowest point of the internal indentation. Now, this is another one. Again, same thing, drop a perpendicular line and we measure this. That's called the indentation depth. Then there's an external cleft, which is from the intercornual line, there's this uh, fundal cleft, and we measure the distance above that. So this distance is called the external cleft. Wall thickness is taken as the mean uterine wall thickness, which is the thickest anterior-posterior diameters of the anterior and posterior walls in the sagittal plane. See, we have these, we measure here, we measure this, and we take a mean of the two. And then the other way to measure is in the coronal plane, where we can we can see the intercornual line, and then we can go to the fundus and measure this distance. The one more thing which they do is the indentation angle, which is the angle measured by tracing the two lines close to the indentation apex. So we draw these lines and we measure this angle. According to CUME definition, these are the best cutoff values and these are the ones which are accepted and we are using it for diagnosing. Actually, I prefer these over the ASNM classification. Now here, we can measure the indentation depth, which is more than 10 millimeters, indentation angle, which is less than 140 degrees, and indentation to wall thickness ratio should be more than 110%. According to Esri classification, they only like indentation depth to the wall thickness ratio, which is this versus this. And this ratio should be more than 50% to call it a septate uterus. According to ASRM classification, they like indentation depth, which is more than 15 millimeters, and angle, which is less than 90 degrees. And ISWAG recommendation is to just use the indentation depth, which is more than 10 millimeters, but the articles which are all specifying are you trying to say to use this CUME definition to diagnose septate uterus. Now, arcuate uterus, they are using the indentation depth, which is less than 10 millimeters. Again, we drop the perpendicular from the distance from the intercornual line to the tip of the endometrium, and we measure this angle, which should be more than 90 degrees in an arcuate uterus. Now, coming to bicorporal uterus, or in the earlier classification used to be bicornuate or uterine diadelphous. Now, these are fusion defects. So here what happens is there are the two separate uterine cavities. Each has its own myometrium and endometrium. And they're actually hard to image on the same plane. As we can see here, it's a vaginal scan. One uterine cavity here, the other is on to the left. And then we are doing an omni view, or we are tracing these. We find that we have to go to the right to get one cavity and go to the left to get the other cavity. And it's very, very hard to get them together. Even when we trace them like this, which is the other recommendation to do on a 3D, is to trace these endometrial cavities from here to here. It doesn't give a good image. But this is pretty classic for a bicorporal uterus. This is another, and these are much easier actually to pick up on transabdominal scan sometimes. You see these external indentation, which is going beyond the uterine cornuas. And this is another example of completely separate, two separate uterine cavities in long axis. They have a separate cervical canal and a vaginal canal. So when we try to diagnose them, there's this external indentation, which is more than 50% of the uterine wall thickness. And there's an inner indentation, which is dividing the uterine cavities into two. And when we use this ARSM classification, we measure the distance, which is the apex, which is this line drawn here between the intercornual line or interosteal line, and we measure the depth to the fundal cleft. And this distance above the tubal ostia to the anterior fundal contour is less than 5 millimeters. Or this thing should be dipping below the cornua, as we can see here, to diagnose bicorporal uterus. We can also measure the intercornual distance, which is from this point to this point. This distance is more than 4 centimeters. Now, according to Esri classifications, the partial type, there are two uterine cavities and they have a one common canal. Or they may have completely separate, where the two separate canals going all the way into the cervix and the vaginal canal. Then there's a third type, which is a bicorporal partial septate, where the width of the fundal indentation is more than 150% of the uterine wall thickness. Now, this is just the examples of these. This was a young girl. I think I did her long time back. She had uterine diadelphys or bicorporal uterus, and the right horn looks normal, and the left side showed this lot of collection in the fluid collection. So she used to get premenstrual cramps, and she had problems, and this was hydrometrocorpus. As compared to this another young girl where the uterine cavities are normal, but there was this fluid collection in the vaginal canal. Now, hemiuterus or unicornuate uterus these are formation defects. And here what happens is you get these sausage-shaped or banana-shaped uterine cavity, and they have a single interstitial segment of the fallopian tube. Here the uterine cavity may be directed to the right, to the left, or maybe central in position. And they have further classification, which may be that they may be having a rudimentary horn which has a functional cavity, type B, which may have non-rudimentary horn without a functional cavity. And if we look at these two images, we can see that this endometrium here definitely looks as if there's this cavity endometrium looks pretty much normal as compared to here, where it's almost hard to look for delineate the endometrial cavity at all. Then there could be the absent contralateral horn, completely absent in these two cases. Now, this patient actually came for infertility workup. She had never had she had an ultrasound done earlier, but no one had picked up the hemiuterus. So she had come for endometrial receptivity, shows beautiful flows. And she still had the IVF done, embryo transfer was done, and she came back with a very nice looking embryo with good cardiac activity. I don't have a follow-up on this patient, but wherever she went, hopefully she continued and delivered normally. Now, this particular patient, another one whose endometrial cavity is completely distorted, and the coronal rendered image actually shows it very nicely. So this we completely discourage her to go for any kind of interference for conception. Then they can be present with hemiuterus, they can have fibroids, and they have endometriosis. This is the same patient. This patient has a submucous fibroid, which is indenting the endometrial cavity. This one has a polyp in the cervical canal. And this was actually an interesting woman who had recently got married and came with severe pain. And so this was a uterine cavity. Single cavity was what I could see. This was being directed to the left, but there was a large fluid collection, which was posterior to the urinary bladder. Excuse me, just one second. So this was seen posterior to the bladder. And because she was in so much pain, no MR, nothing was done, and she was taken for surgery. And this turned out to be a dilated fallopian tube. Now, aplastic uterus is the type 5, where there is no uterine cavity at all. This is a long axis and transverse view on the same patient, an absent uterine cavity. There could be a small cavity which may have a aplastic uterine cavity with a rudimentary cavity, or without aplastic uterus without any cavity. Now, these are associated, they may have this syndrome where there could be an absent uterus or a very small hyperplastic uterus, but these people have normal looking ovaries and the karyotype is normal. They may be associated with renal anomalies and skeletal anomalies. And Turner syndrome, Mullerian anomalies are seen in about 20% of patients. And here there's one example, which is a hyperplastic uterus with a very thin endometrium, and they generally have streak ovaries. Now, we know that according to H3 classification, cervical and vaginal abnormalities are classified separately. Now, here we see that on a coronal plane, there's a normal cervix. And sometimes when we are doing a 3D, we should make sure that, we have to sometimes change angles to get the cervix in complete alignment. Then this is a septate uterus, but there is a single cervix. Now here there's complete septate uterus plus a complete separate two cervices. And this was a double cervix in a bicorporal uterus. This was no cervix at all in an absent cervical Now, this patient I've just shown you earlier had actually 2 cervices and 2 vaginal canals. And this is another patient who has 2 uterine cavities, a partial, it's actually like a complete septate uterus, because we can see the fundal contour is normal. So it had 2 cervices and 2 vaginal canals. Now, I mean, I always say MR is a problem solving modality. And with the present scenario, with the present improvement in technology, and with all these artificial intelligence coming in fact, these machines have these drawings which are available, and you can look into that and diagnose the lesion. So I personally prefer 3D ultrasound, which has a very high sensitivity and a very good specificity to diagnose any of these lesions, whether it's a hemiuterus, bicorporal, or a septate uterus. And MR sensitivity is almost the same. But yes, if there is a problem, then we definitely do recommend MRs. And so I would say 3D endovaginal ultrasound is the primary modality of choice. We know it's less expensive, it's less invasive, it's less time consuming, it's very well tolerated, and it's better than hysteroscopy or MR. And once it's been diagnosed, it can improve the management for the doctors who are going in for hysteroscopy. And I always, this is my favorite line, if I feel that if a radiologist recommends too many additional studies, then it's probably that it's not using all the information which is available on their ultrasound. Thank you. So,
Thank you, ma'am, for such a nice presentation.
Should I stop sharing my screen now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So there are a few questions which are there. So can we take the questions, ma'am, now?
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Okay. So the first question is from Dr. Lata. I have a patient with complete septus uterus. She has twin pregnancy, one in the left and the other in the right horn of the uterus. She wants to continue the pregnancy. What advice to be given?
Well, she has a good, I mean, if she wants to continue, she can do a frequent follow-ups. Let her continue. But she should be explained the risk of septate uterus. It depends how good the cavities look like. And I think I would follow her more frequently. I mean, at least in the initial phases, to see that she's continuing normally. And look for cervical incompetence and see there should be no growth restriction, and look for the vascularity.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. So the next question is from Dr. Nishtha. Ma'am, can you please tell the technique of taking 3D images of uterus? Some techniques.
What I like to do is I like to have a very good 2D log axis view. Once I have that, then we can I just go back to one of my slides and then see? What should I do, Gaurav? Should I say share screen?
Yes, ma'am, you can share your screen. No problem.
Okay, then I can just go back to that slide and show what we do.
Yeah, ma'am. On the bottom of your screen, there will be option, ma'am, share screen. You just take the cursor down and you will see.
Okay, but I can't see my presentation now.
Ma'am, it's still not shared. You have to share your screen.
Now?
No, ma'am.
So it's not sharing. Then I'm pressing it, but it's not sharing. Okay, never mind. I'll answer the question. It's just much easier to do it share. Okay, let me see. Is it working now?
Yes, yes, ma'am. Now we can see.
Okay, where did my presentation go? Okay. Okay, this is it. So what I like to do is I like to have a good long axis view, as you can see here. And then before doing anything, I like to do my C-plane, which is what I showed here. We have that, and we pass this line through the region of interest. So you have the long axis and the coronal plane simultaneously. And you can see that it's very nicely seen here in all these. Then doing a 3D, this thing, we take a sweep. one should keep still, because we are used to the 2D imaging where we have to move the probe to get the good image. Here we keep the hand steady, we do not move the probe, and we just on the button press we take a sweep. If you find that the image is moving, ask the patient to hold the breath. And once you have a good image, a long axis, you will get these three long axis, transverse and coronal plane simultaneously. Then you can move this line, which is called the region of interest, or there'll be a dot. You can bring it to the area of interest, and you'll get a simul display which looks like this. The other thing which I do is I like to change the angle of my coronal plane so that I get an image which one understands that there is, instead of this image which looks where the fundus is pointing laterally. So I do change my image and I get a coronal plane like this. And is that clear, or
I
is that
think, ma'am, yes, we can. Yeah.
So I'll stop share.
Yeah. So we can take the next question.
Yeah.
Uh,
Am I
earliest.
I'm not sharing now, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We can see your video.
Okay.
So the next question is, earliest anomaly of embryo can be detected at how many weeks? Whether Doppler study of heart should be performed at 6 to 7 weeks?
Sorry, say that once again. What?
Earliest anomaly of embryo can be detected at how many weeks? Whether Doppler study of heart should be performed at 6 to 7 weeks?
No. Doppler study of fetal, that's an obstetrical question. Okay, fine. No, we can just do an M mode. We do not recommend putting in a Doppler to hear the heart, to take the heart rate. Okay, so we only need a heart rate. We do an M mode. We can put color. We put an M mode and get the heart rate. 6 weeks, that's all you can see. The earliest anomalies which start, we can start picking up when we do this 3D the ultrasound, which actually they talked about the Sonoscape just now. They showed you the images. By 9 to 10 weeks, if we do a careful scan, we can start suspecting. But 12 weeks is the time when actually we like to do, when we are doing the NT scan, to start looking for anomalies. A lot of anomalies can be picked up at that time, but we cannot definitely be sure. So we do follow-ups. But 12 weeks is the time when one would start looking to try and identify everything. Was that your question, or were you?
Yeah, so this was the question actually which came in the chat box.
Okay.
So the next question is how to differentiate between complete septate and dediplus uterus.
Okay. You have to, I'll show you my images once again. Sure. I'll have to share the screen.
Yeah, ma'am, you can do it again, no problem.
Okay. God, I'm bad at these things. Okay, can you see the screen now?
Not now, ma'am.
Okay, now.
Yes, now we can see.
Okay, so let me go to this slide where your question is from complete septate uterus versus a bicornuate uterus. Let me see if I have. Okay, here, this is a good. See now, so actually, I don't know. I didn't put I should have put one comparison, and that's the mistake I did. Okay, when we are looking at complete septate uterus, look at the fundal contour. That is the most important step. The fundal contour will generally be convex, will be convex and normally seen. Whereas in case of a see, look here. Now we can see here two uterine cavities. Again, the fundal contour is very nicely seen. And the two separate endometrial cavities. When we go to bicornuate uterus, when we go to a uterine didelphus, okay, I'll show it on this image. Now you look at the fundal contour and compare it to what I just showed you. That has a normal convex appearance. What happened? I lost you.
Ma'am, we can see.
Oh, but I can't see anything. Gaurav, I can't see anything, but I'll just talk. I can't really see any. I don't know what's happened. Suddenly, just
Ma'am, you
stop.
can stop sharing the screen. If
Nothing is happening. It suddenly went dead.
okay, so I can just
Yeah, you just get off the screen, and if you can hear me, just
yeah.
1 second. I'll call you. देखो जल्दी आएगी वो बंद हो गया है ये just suddenly went blank huh? Sorry, I'm trying, Gaurav, but suddenly it seems to have gone dead.
No problem, ma'am. We can wait for some time.
Just on its own.
I think some technical problem has come. I think just couple of minutes, ma'am will join soon. Yes, ma'am, we can see you now.
Okay, sorry, I don't know. It just suddenly went dead.
No problem, ma'am. It's okay.
Okay, I was on this slide here. Okay, so here what I was saying was if you look at the fundal contour, one, it dips below the uterine cornua. So there are two uterine horns, each has its own myometrium and endometrium, and this is an important part. There's a fundal cleft or external indentation which is coming below the um, uterine cornua. The second thing what one can do is measure the depth. So that is the way to do all those 50%. You can measure the uterine wall thickness, but this thing is look for the fundal contour. If the fundal contour is normal, probability of it being a septate uterus is much higher as compared to uterine didelphys. Now, only one place where actually it becomes confusing is when you look at this, which is the bicorporal septate type. Now here there is a fundal cleft, but here then we look at the width of fundal indentation. So the fundal contour is one of the most important step to diagnose these. So I'm going to stop sharing and then.
I think you can keep your presentation on. I think because there are many questions which are coming, they want to see the images of the specific thing. So
Okay.
yeah. So the next question is, how do you do?
Okay.
Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we can see your screen also, so you can just be like this. How do you do 3D in retroverted uterus as it casts shadows and doesn't give a clear picture? Do you recommend MRI in such cases?
No, I don't. I'm sorry. I mean, if people who are listening on MR, but they'll get disappointed. But no, you retroverted uterus, try and get it straight. What you can do is, if your retroverted uterus is being pushed back, try and angle it. Try making the patient feel bladder, and you will be able to do it. And try the C plane, because once it's going down, you can try moving your region of interest in that line of action, going into that direction, and you'll be able to get it. It's sometimes it's very difficult, and that time I've made the patient fill up the bladder, which is uncomfortable for the patient, but they have been very cooperative enough to get that.
Okay, ma'am. Next question is, ma'am, share a case of septate uterus with pregnancy in which you had to deliver fetus with steroid prematurity. This is somebody is asking.
See, well, I being in radiology, you see what happens is that we do not I mean, we follow them up, but we lose them at certain point. And because we do not get a feedback, these patients jump from one place to the other. But the classic case, which I would accept it, no, I would like to share with you, is a unicornuate uterus. Now, this particular lady had 6 missed abortions, and she came for the first time for a scan when we picked up a hemiuterus. Before she could have any counseling done, she got pregnant, and we followed her up to 12 weeks. She came to us for 12 weeks. Till 12 weeks, she was doing fine. And then after that, we lost her because she didn't come back. But yes, I have had at least 2 patients with the hemiuterus who have delivered normally. One of them has continued, has had 2 babies. Then your question on perceptive uterus, yes, they do deliver. I've had multiple patients over there. If I mean, one of them, I think I may have just shown also, or I don't remember if I put that slide. She had come to us with one missed abortion, came for a confirmation of pregnancy, and then she continued normally. She had a normal baby. And your question of preterm, I'm not too sure because I didn't get a feedback on it. Till I followed her up, she was doing fine. So I think the OBGYN may be able to answer better, but I think once they've crossed the thing, they should be doing fine.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Couple of more questions, ma'am. What is the FHR to define fetal bradycardia at 6 weeks?
Generally less than 100.
Okay.
We follow them up. I mean, I do call them less, but 80 is very low. So anything between, and we follow them up. Anytime less than 100, I call them back.
Okay, ma'am. And the last question, I think, at what measurement do we call a small uterus in an adolescent girl?
Well, just out of the thing, I'm not this thing, because what I generally do is I have all these measurements on my table. In fact, all this T-shaped uterus and all these which I showed you, I look into that and I compare it. But if I was supposed to say, I think less than 5, I'm actually not, I can't answer that question because I really don't get too much into it. If I find it small, I'm looking at it and subjectively I find it less, I'll go back and look into the literature to see what it should be.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. If later on there will be some more questions comes, I'll send it to you, and then we can send it back to them. What are regarding their queries regarding the questions, ma'am.
Sure.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sparing time for today's webinar. It was a pleasure listening to you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, audience, to be with us. If you have missed the today's webinar, by tomorrow it will be uploaded on Sonoscape India YouTube page, so you can see it again tomorrow on the YouTube page. So on behalf of Sonoscape, I thank you everybody to be a part of this webinar. Thank you so much, ma'am.